My father refused to give me $2,000 to bury my husband, the same man who had spent nearly $900,000 on my sister's college tuition, her house, and her fairy tale wedding. When I called him, voice shaking, begging for help to lay Daniel to rest, he paused for 10 long seconds. Then he said, "Madison deserves it more than you. You've never deserved anything." My mother stayed silent on the other line. I walked out of their lives that day, convinced it was the last time I'd ever hear from them. 1 year later, my phone rang. Madison was sobbing on the other end. "The IRS is investigating Mom and Dad. They could go to prison. Only you can save them." And I realized, for 25 years, I wasn't the worthless daughter. I was the only one holding the evidence. I'm Gabrielle, 42 years old. This is the story of how I went from scapegoat to the person holding my family's fate in my hands. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Growing up in the Whitmore household, I learned early that love came with a price tag, and mine was always marked down to 0. My sister Madison was the princess. That's what my parents called her, without irony, without hesitation. She had the kind of beauty that made strangers stop and compliment my mother on her genes. Blonde hair, green eyes, a smile that could charm the sternest teacher into giving extensions on homework. I was the reliable one, which sounds like a compliment until you realize it's code for the one we don't need to worry about. The numbers tell the story better than feelings ever could. Madison's education at USC cost my parents $287,000 between 2005 and 2009. 4 years of private university, sorority dues, spring break trips to Cabo, and a graduation party that rivaled some weddings. I remember sitting in the audience at her commencement ceremony, watching my father beam like he'd won the lottery. My education cost me 11 years of debt repayment. $34,000 borrowed for community college and a state university, paid back at 6% interest while I ate ramen 3 nights a week. No one attended my graduation. My parents had a golf tournament that weekend, and Madison was exhausted from a spa day. When Madison turned 18, my father handed her the keys to a brand new BMW 3 Series. $42,000 of German engineering wrapped in a red bow. I remember her squealing in the driveway while I stood by the garage, watching. I was driving a 1998 Honda Civic I'd bought for $3,000 with money saved from working at a grocery store since I was 16. The air conditioning hadn't worked in 2 years. For a long time, I thought it was my fault. I wasn't pretty enough, wasn't charming enough, wasn't whatever invisible quality Madison possessed that made her worthy of adoration. I don't blame Madison anymore. She only took what was given. I blame myself for spending 25 years believing I didn't deserve anything at all. The pattern repeated itself at every milestone, but nothing made it clearer than our weddings. Madison got married in October 2018 at a resort in Sedona, 180 guests, a string quartet for the ceremony, a 12-piece band for the reception, imported flowers from Ecuador, a custom wedding dress that cost more than my annual salary at the time. $78,000. My father announced the total at the rehearsal dinner like it was a badge of honor. "Nothing is too expensive for my little girl," he said, raising his champagne glass while the crowd applauded. I got married in March 2012 at the Phoenix City Hall. 12 guests, mostly Daniel's family and 2 friends from work. My dress cost $120 from a department store sale rack. Our reception was sandwiches at a nearby cafe. Total cost, $1,200. We paid for everything ourselves. My mother didn't attend. She had a spa appointment that had been booked months in advance and couldn't be rescheduled. She sent a card with a $50 gift certificate to a restaurant we'd never been to. My father showed up 40 minutes late, without a gift, wearing khakis and a polo shirt like he was heading to a casual lunch. He shook Daniel's hand with the enthusiasm of a man meeting his accountant. "Good luck," he told my husband. "Hope you make enough money to take care of her." Then he left before we cut the cake. I didn't ask for $78,000. I didn't ask for Sedona or string quartets or imported flowers. I just wanted my mother to be there. I wanted my father to look at me the way he looked at Madison, but apparently, even that was too much to ask. Daniel held my hand that night as I cried in our tiny apartment. "They don't see you," he said quietly, "but I do, and you deserve to be loved." He was the first person who ever made me believe that might be true. The exclusion wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, administrative, like I'd been removed from a mailing list I never knew existed. In 2019, I discovered there was a family group chat called Whitmore Family. Madison, my parents, Brandon, Madison's husband, all included. 23 months of birthday plans, holiday coordination, and inside jokes. I only found out because Madison accidentally forwarded me a message meant for the group. When I asked my mother why I wasn't added, she seemed genuinely confused. "Oh, I thought you were," she said. "I'll add you now." She never did. Every Christmas dinner, the seating arrangement told the truth my family wouldn't speak aloud. Madison and Brandon sat at the main table with my parents, the adult table, my father called it, even though I was 6 years older than my sister. Daniel and I were relegated to a folding card table in the corner with distant cousins and my mother's elderly aunt who couldn't remember anyone's name. Daniel once joked that we were seated with the people my parents were legally obligated to invite, but hoped wouldn't come. He stopped joking about it when he saw my face. When I got promoted to senior accountant in 2020, after 9 years of 60-hour weeks and 3 professional certifications, no one in my family acknowledged it. Not a card, not a call, not even a text. 3 months later, Madison announced she was starting her own business, a real estate company my parents funded entirely. My father threw a party, 30 guests, catered appetizers, a champagne toast where he called Madison the next great entrepreneur in the family. Her company had no employees, no clients, and no revenue. But it had my father's pride. I was a tax accountant who helped families navigate the most complex financial decisions of their lives. But to my family, I was just a tool, useful when they needed someone to look over paperwork, invisible the rest of the year. And speaking of paperwork, my father asked me to review his tax documents 3 times between 2016 and 2022. "You understand this stuff," he said. "Madison's no good with numbers." I should have said no. Instead, I helped. Because that's what I did. That's who I was. I didn't know then that those documents would become the most important files I'd ever hold. Daniel Simmons wasn't the kind of man who made grand gestures. He didn't buy expensive jewelry or plan surprise vacations. What he gave me was smaller and infinitely more valuable. He made me feel seen. We met in 2009 at a coffee shop near my community college. He was an apprentice electrician with calloused hands and a gentle smile. I was 26, buried in debt, working 2 jobs while finishing my degree. He asked if he could share my table because every other seat was taken. 4 hours later, we were still talking. Daniel made $68,000 a year as an industrial electrician. Not wealthy, not poor. Enough to pay the bills, take a vacation once a year, save a little for retirement. He never complained about money, never compared himself to others, never made me feel like I should want more than what we had. "You don't need them to see you," he told me once, after a particularly painful Thanksgiving where my father spent the entire dinner praising Madison's business acumen. "You already know who you are. Their blindness is their loss, not yours." He woke up every morning at 5 to make coffee before I got up for work, left little notes in my lunch bag, asked me every evening, "Do you need to talk about anything?" Not because he was required to, because he wanted to know. Christmas 2021 was the last holiday we spent with my family. My father made a comment about Daniel's job, something dismissive about manual labor and real careers. Daniel set down his fork and looked my father directly in the eyes. "My wife has a name," he said calmly. "It's Gabrielle, and she's the hardest working person I know. I'd appreciate it if you spoke to both of us with respect." My father told us to leave. We did. On March 14th, 2024, Daniel mentioned his chest felt tight. "Probably just stress from the job site," he said. "I'll be fine by tomorrow." On March 15th, 2024, I got a phone call from Phoenix General Hospital. He never made it out of the ambulance. The funeral home gave me a folder with itemized costs printed in neat columns. Basic cremation service, simple urn, memorial room rental, death certificates, transportation fees, $7,200. I had $5,200 in savings. Daniel's life insurance policy, the small one his company provided, would take 6 to 8 weeks to process. The funeral home needed payment within 10 days. I needed $2,000, just $2,000. I sat in my car outside my parents' house for 20 minutes before I could make myself dial. My hands were shaking. Daniel had been gone for 3 days. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten anything except the crackers a neighbor brought over. I was running on grief and desperation. My father answered on the fourth ring. "Dad," I said, and my voice cracked on that single syllable. "Daniel passed away. I need help. I need to borrow $2,000 for the funeral costs. I'll pay you back within 6 months. I promise." Silence. 10 seconds. I counted them. Then, "Madison just bought new furniture for her living room. Your mother and I need to hold on to our savings right now." I felt something inside me go still. Very, very still. "Besides," he continued, "Madison has always been the one who, well, she deserves our help more than you do. You've never really deserved anything we gave you, Gabrielle. You know that." My mother said nothing. I could hear her breathing on the other extension. "I understand," I heard myself say. The words came out flat, dead, like something had been severed inside me and hadn't figured out yet that it was supposed to bleed. I hung up. I sold Daniel's truck, the one he was still making payments on, for $3,000. I borrowed the rest from a coworker who refused to let me pay her back. I buried my husband without my family, and I realized, sitting alone in that memorial room with 12 people who actually cared whether I was alive or dead, that I hadn't lost $2,000. I'd lost the last illusion I had that my family had room for me. That was the day I stopped waiting for them to see my worth. That was the day I walked away. Cutting off your family sounds dramatic until you realize how simple it actually is. You just stop. Stop calling. Stop texting. Stop showing up. Stop hoping. The first month was the hardest. Every time my phone buzzed, some desperate part of me hoped it was my mother calling to apologize. It never was. When her name did appear, the messages were variations of the same theme. "Where are you? Your father is asking about you. Madison's birthday is next month. You're coming, right?" I didn't respond to any of them. Eventually, I blocked their numbers entirely. I threw myself into work. Morrison and Blake, the accounting firm where I'd spent 12 years building my career, became my refuge. Tax season 2024 was brutal. I handled 47 complex returns, including 3 estate cases and 2 IRS audit defenses. My supervisor called me indispensable. My clients sent thank you notes. For the first time in my life, I let myself feel proud without immediately qualifying it with someone else's disapproval. I joined a support group for widows at a community center near my apartment. 8 women who gathered every Tuesday night to talk about grief and rebuilding. They taught me a word I'd never really understood before: boundaries. Boundaries weren't walls. They weren't punishment. They were simply the lines you draw to protect what's left of yourself when other people have taken too much. One evening in January 2025, I was cleaning out my home office, something I'd been avoiding since Daniel died. Behind a stack of old tax guides, I found a manila folder labeled Whitmore Family, Tax Documents, 2016-2022. My father's paperwork. From those times he'd asked me to look things over, I almost threw it away. Something stopped me. A feeling I couldn't name, some instinct that whispered these pages might matter someday. I put the folder in my filing cabinet and closed the drawer. 11 months of silence, 11 months of peace. I should have known it wouldn't last. March 2nd, 2025, 9:47 p.m. I was reading in bed when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Arizona area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Telemarketers had been relentless lately. But something made me answer. Gabby? The voice was raw, hoarse, like someone had been crying for hours. I recognized it immediately. I just didn't want to. Who is this? It's Madison. Please don't hang up. I considered it. My finger hovered over the red button, but curiosity won over self-preservation. I don't have a sister, I said. I know you're angry. I deserve that. She took a shuddering breath. But I need to tell you something. The IRS is investigating Mom and Dad. I sat up straighter. What? Criminal Investigation Division. They're looking into the money Mom and Dad gave me over the years. The house, the business loans, everything. They're saying it might be tax fraud. Dad could go to prison, Gabby. Actually go to prison. The words hung in the air. Prison. My 78-year-old father in an orange jumpsuit. I tried to feel something, satisfaction maybe, or vindication. All I felt was tired. And this involves me how? Dad said, Madison's voice dropped. He said you have documents, from when you used to help him with the taxes. He said you might have copies of things. I thought of the manila folder in my filing cabinet, the one I'd almost thrown away 2 months ago. What kind of documents? I don't know, an email maybe? Something about how to structure the payments? Gabby, please, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've been a terrible sister, but they're our parents, and you're the only one who might be able to fix this. I was quiet for a long moment. I'll think about it, I said finally. Then I hung up and went to my filing cabinet. I didn't just have an email, I had everything. The folder was thicker than I remembered. I spread the contents across my kitchen table at 10:15 p.m., still in my pajamas, hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, from something closer to revelation. The email was there. December 4th, 2019. My father had CC'd me by accident. He'd meant to send it only to his personal accountant. The subject line was innocuous. Madison's business structure. The content was anything but. Listed as a loan. The IRS doesn't audit these kinds of things if the paperwork looks right. Just make the documents look professional and we'll be fine. I remembered receiving it. I remembered feeling a flicker of unease. But I'd been busy with tax season, and I'd told myself it wasn't my business. My father was a successful businessman. He knew what he was doing. Now, I understood exactly what he'd been doing. The loan agreement was dated March 2020, $285,000 from Ronald and Patricia Whitmore to Madison Whitmore Keller. 0% interest. No repayment schedule. No default provisions. No collateral. In other words, not a loan at all. A gift disguised as a business transaction to avoid federal gift tax reporting requirements. I pulled out more documents. Bank transfer records. 6 transactions between 2018 and 2023. Total amount, $892,000. Not one had been reported on Form 709. The gift tax return my father was legally required to file for amounts over $15,000 per year. I'd seen enough tax fraud cases to know what I was looking at. This wasn't carelessness. This was systematic evasion. At 11:30 p.m., I called Marcus Webb, my former colleague at Morrison & Blake, now an independent tax consultant, someone I trusted. Marcus, I said when he answered, I need you to look at something, and I need you to tell me exactly how much trouble it represents. Gabby, it's almost midnight. What's going on? Family drama, I said, the kind that comes with federal penalties. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I need to ask you something. If you were in my position, holding evidence that could either save or destroy the people who abandoned you when you needed them most, what would you do? Would you hand it over to the IRS and let justice run its course? Or would you use it to negotiate? Comment below. Tell me, Team Justice or Team Leverage? And if you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next changed everything. Marcus met me at a coffee shop near his office 2 days later. He looked the same as I remembered: wire-rimmed glasses, graying temples, the perpetually worried expression of someone who spent his life finding mistakes in other people's paperwork. He spread my copies across the table, arranging them chronologically while his coffee grew cold. 20 minutes passed. He didn't speak. I watched his eyebrows climb higher with each document. Finally, he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Gabby," he said quietly, "this is bad. Really bad." "How bad?" "Your father underreported gift transfers by approximately $612,000 over 5 years. The IRS can assess back taxes on the unreported amounts. That's probably around $312,000, depending on which year's rates apply. Then there's the fraud penalty, 75% of the underpaid tax. Another $234,000, give or take, plus interest. We're looking at over $600,000 total." I let out a breath. "And the email?" Marcus tapped the printout with one finger. "This is what changes everything. Without this, your father could claim it was an oversight, a mistake. With this?" He shook his head. "This shows intent. This shows he knew what he was doing and deliberately structured the transactions to evade taxes. That's not a civil matter anymore. That's potential criminal fraud. 3 to 5 years federal prison." "Jesus." "Yeah." Marcus looked at me over his glasses. "The question is, what are you going to do with this information?" I stared at the documents. Evidence that could destroy my father. Vindication for 25 years of being told I was worthless. "I don't want revenge," I said slowly. I want to be seen. I want them to acknowledge what they did. Publicly." Marcus nodded. "Then you have leverage. Probably more than you've ever had in your life." He was right. But having power and knowing how to use it were two very different things. I found out about the party by accident. 3 days after meeting with Marcus, I logged into an old Facebook account I hadn't used in months. I'd created it years ago to stay connected with college friends. But mostly I'd forgotten it existed. When the feed loaded, the first post I saw was from my mother. "Join us in celebrating 45 years of marriage. Ronald and Patricia Whitmore invite you to an evening of love, family, and legacy. March 15th, 6 o'clock p.m., Scottsdale Country Club, Grand Ballroom." The attached image showed my parents in an engagement photo from 1980, superimposed over an elegant invitation design. 127 people had already RSVP'd. The comments were filled with congratulations and heart emojis. I scrolled through the details: live jazz band, 4-course dinner, custom cocktails, a photographer from Scottsdale Living magazine who would be covering the event for their Prominent Families feature. My parents were throwing themselves a party that probably cost more than Daniel's entire funeral. I checked the guest list. Madison, Brandon, cousins I barely remembered, business associates, golf buddies, country club friends. My name wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. I stared at the date on the invitation. March 15th, 1 year to the day since Daniel died. 1 year since I'd begged my father for help and been told I deserved nothing. The universe has a dark sense of humor. I thought about Marcus's words. "You have leverage." I thought about the documents sitting in my filing cabinet. I thought about my father standing in that ballroom, surrounded by everyone he wanted to impress, celebrating his legacy of family and love. A legacy built on lies, on exclusion, on $892,000 hidden from the IRS. And suddenly I knew exactly what I was going to do. Not revenge, something better, reckoning. My father called me on March 8th, first time in almost a year. I let it ring 4 times before answering, made him wait. "Gabrielle." His voice was exactly as I remembered, that particular mix of authority and irritation, like I was an employee who'd missed a deadline. "We need to talk about those documents." "I'm sorry, who is this?" "Don't play games with me." Madison told you about the IRS situation. I need those papers sent to my attorney immediately. Your attorney? I kept my voice neutral. The one who helped you structure those loans that weren't actually loans? Silence. Listen to me carefully, my father said, his tone hardening. This is a family matter. Whatever you think you have, it belongs to the family. You'll hand it over, and we'll forget this whole unpleasantness. Unpleasantness. I repeated the word slowly, tasting its inadequacy. You mean like being told I don't deserve help when my husband is dead? That kind of unpleasantness? That has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with this. My voice didn't rise. If anything, it dropped lower, calmer. You spent 25 years making it clear I was worthless to you. You spent $892,000 on Madison while telling me I deserved nothing. And now you need me. If you send anything to the IRS, I'll tell everyone you're a vindictive, ungrateful child. I'll sue you for theft of private documents. I have lawyers. You have lawyers, I agreed. And I have an email where you explicitly instructed your accountant to file false paperwork. An email you accidentally CC'd to me. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division would probably find that very interesting. More silence. Longer this time. What do you want? The arrogance was cracking now. I could hear the fear underneath. I'll let you know, I said, and hung up. For the first time in my life, my father didn't have the last word. 2 days later, my mother called. Different approach, same goal. Sweetheart. Her voice trembled. I couldn't tell if it was genuine or practiced. We need to talk, mother to daughter. I'd waited 37 years to hear my mother call me sweetheart. It felt hollow now, a tool rather than a term of endearment. Are you calling to apologize? I asked. Or to ask for documents? A pause. Both. I want both. At least she was honest. I know we've made mistakes, she continued. I know the family has been unfair to you sometimes. But your father, he's under so much stress right now. His health isn't what it used to be. If he goes to prison... Did you know? I interrupted. About the tax fraud? Silence. I need an answer, Mom. Did you know he was hiding money through Madison's fake business loans? I trusted your father to handle the finances. I didn't ask questions. You didn't ask questions when he spent $900,000 on Madison and nothing on me either. I kept my voice steady. You didn't say anything when he told me I didn't deserve help burying my husband. You've never said anything. Gabby, please. Your silence wasn't neutral, Mom. It was a choice. Every time you stayed quiet while he treated me like I was nothing, you were agreeing with him. I could hear her crying now. Real tears, or strategic tears. I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. He'll change the will, she said suddenly. Your father said if you give those documents to the IRS, he'll make sure you don't get a penny. I laughed, genuinely laughed. Mom, I haven't been in Dad's will since 2018. I saw the paperwork when he asked me to review his estate documents 5 years ago. Everything goes to Madison. Always has. The crying stopped. I didn't know that, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't ask. Madison showed up at my apartment on March 12th. No warning. Just a knock at 7 p.m. and her face in my peephole, pale and drawn, looking nothing like the golden child I remembered. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. You should have called. You would have said no. She was right about that. Can we talk, please? I stepped aside. She walked into my living room and looked around like she was trying to memorize the details. The modest furniture, the photos of Daniel on the bookshelf, the complete absence of family pictures. Nice place, she said. It wasn't. What do you want, Madison? She turned to face me. I didn't know what Dad was doing. With the money. I thought it was just gifts. Because he loved me. Did you ever ask why I never got any gifts? She flinched. I thought you didn't need them. That's what Mom and Dad always said. Gabby's independent. Gabby takes care of herself. Did you ever think about whether I wanted to take care of myself? Or whether I was just never given another option? Madison's eyes were wet. I waited for sympathy to appear in my chest. It didn't. The real estate company, I said. You knew it wasn't a real business. You knew you had no clients, no revenue. Where did you think the money was coming from? I thought it was an investment in my future. It was a tax shelter. You were a vehicle for hiding money from the IRS. Dad didn't give you $900,000 because he loves you, Madison. He gave it to you because he needed somewhere to put money the government couldn't see. I watched my words hit her, watched the golden child realize her pedestal was made of fraud. That's not true, she whispered, but the certainty was gone from her voice. Ask yourself, I said, if he really loved you unconditionally, why did every gift come with paperwork? She had no answer. I let the silence stretch until Madison broke. What are you going to do? I'd thought about this for days, played out scenarios, consulted with Marcus about what was legal, what was ethical, what was simply human. Tell Mom and Dad I have conditions. Madison straightened slightly. Conditions? 3 things. I held up fingers as I counted. First, a public apology, at the anniversary party on March 15th, in front of their friends, their business associates, everyone they've spent 45 years impressing. They acknowledge how they treated me. 25 years of favoritism, exclusion, and cruelty. Out loud. In public. Gabby. Second, they admit they were wrong to refuse me help when Daniel died, specifically, by name. They say they're sorry for telling me I didn't deserve it. Madison's face had gone white. They'll never agree to that. Third, $2,000, plus interest, 7% compounded over 12 months, $2,140 total. That's nothing. That's pocket change for them. Exactly. I met her eyes. It was never about the money, Madison. It was about being told I wasn't worth it. This is about them proving I was. And if they do all this, then I don't give the documents to the IRS. I keep them, insurance policy, and we go our separate ways. And if they don't, I pulled out my phone, opened my calendar, and showed her the screen. March 17th, 10 o'clock a.m., IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Agent Thomas Rivera. I have an appointment scheduled, 48 hours after the party. If they don't meet my conditions by midnight on March 15th, I keep that appointment. You're not bluffing. No. Madison stood there for a long moment, looking at me like she was seeing someone new. Maybe she was. They'll never apologize publicly, she said finally. You know that. I know. I walked to the door and opened it. But I'm giving them the chance, so when everything falls apart, they can't say I didn't. She left without another word. The choice was theirs now. March 15th, 2025. Exactly 1 year since I held Daniel's hand in a hospital room and watched the monitors go flat. The Scottsdale Country Club sat at the edge of a golf course, all white columns and manicured hedges, the kind of place that charged $250 for a membership application just to see if you were worth considering. My father had been a member for 18 years, his favorite place to feel important. I watched from my car as guests arrived. Black sedans and luxury SUVs lined up at the valet station. Women in cocktail dresses and men in tailored suits disappeared through the gilded entrance. A photographer from Scottsdale Living magazine waited near the door, capturing arrivals for the Prominent Families feature. 127 people coming to celebrate 45 years of the Whitmore marriage, the legacy of family, love, and lies. Through the tall windows, I could see the grand ballroom filling up. $8,000 floral arrangements, a 4-piece jazz ensemble, crystal chandeliers casting everything in warm, flattering light. My parents stood near the entrance, greeting guests like royalty receiving subjects. My father in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother in a red sequined dress, diamonds at her throat. Madison and Brandon hovered nearby. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in Madison's shoulders. She knew what was coming. Or rather, she knew what might be coming. I had sent my conditions through her. My parents' response had arrived 6 hours ago via my father's text message. I don't apologize for protecting my family. Come to the party or don't, but don't expect me to humiliate myself for your grudge. Typical. Even now, he couldn't see it as anything but my problem. I wasn't going to the party. I had something better planned. Madison called me 30 minutes before the party was scheduled to begin. He said no. Her voice was flat, defeated. I begged him, Gabby. I literally got on my knees and begged him to just apologize, to do this one thing. What exactly did he say? He said, she took a shaky breath. He said he refuses to apologize to that girl in front of his friends. He said you're trying to blackmail him and he won't negotiate with terrorists. Terrorists. 25 years of giving everything and asking for nothing, and I was a terrorist for wanting acknowledgement. And Mom? She cried, said she'd talk to him. Then she went to get her hair done. A bitter laugh. Same thing she always does. Cries and then disappears. I sat in my car, watching more guests stream into the country club. My father's kingdom. His carefully constructed image of success, respectability, family values. Madison, I want you to understand something. What? I'm not doing this for revenge. If I wanted revenge, I would have sent those documents to the IRS the moment I found them. I gave them a choice, a real choice. Accountability in exchange for mercy. And they chose wrong. They chose what they always choose, their pride over their daughter. I paused. But I'm not going to crash the party. I'm not going to make a scene. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to let the truth do the work for me. What does that mean? It means there's a journalist at that party who's about to become very curious about the Whitmore family legacy. Silence on the line. Gabby, please. They had their chance. Now I have mine. I hung up and pulled out a piece of paper, a letter I'd written that morning, one question, addressed to one journalist, about a family that wasn't quite as perfect as they pretended to be. I walked into the country club at 6:42 p.m., but not through the ballroom entrance. I went to the lounge bar in the lobby, close enough to hear the jazz music floating from the party, far enough to remain invisible. The letter had been delivered an hour earlier by a courier service. No return address. Just a handwritten envelope addressed to Janet Morrison, senior feature writer, Scottsdale Living Magazine. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a simple question. Mr. Ronald Whitmore has publicly celebrated giving nearly $900,000 to his younger daughter Madison over the past decade. His older daughter Gabrielle was not invited to tonight's celebration. She also received no financial assistance when her husband died last year. Could you ask Mr. Whitmore to explain the discrepancy? For the Prominent Families feature, readers might be interested in what family values look like behind closed doors. I hadn't included anything about the IRS, nothing about tax fraud, nothing that could be traced back to illegal activity, just a question. A journalist's instinct would do the rest. I ordered a glass of wine and waited. At 7:15 p.m., I watched through the archway as Janet Morrison, blonde hair, tailored suit, press badge visible, approached my father during a lull in the greeting line. She was smiling, professional, curious. I couldn't hear the conversation from where I sat, but I could see my father's face. First, confusion, then irritation, then something that looked almost like fear. Janet asked another question. My father's voice rose. I couldn't make out words, but the tone carried, defensive, angry. Heads began to turn. I took a sip of wine and watched my father do exactly what I knew he would do when confronted with accountability. He made it worse. This was the moment I'd waited my entire life for. But before I tell you what happened next, I have to ask, what do you think my father did when a journalist questioned him in front of his friends? Did he stay calm and deflect like a smart man would? Or did he do exactly what narcissists always do when their carefully constructed image gets threatened? Comment self-destruct if you think he made it worse for himself. And if you're still here, like this video, because what he said next was heard by everyone in that room. My father's voice cut through the jazz music like a knife. This is none of your business. I set down my wine glass and moved closer to the archway. A crowd had formed. Maybe 25 people gathered in a loose semicircle around my father and the journalist. Janet Morrison held her ground. Mr. Whitmore, I'm simply asking a factual question. You've publicly celebrated your generosity to your daughter Madison. Why wasn't your other daughter, Gabrielle, included in tonight's celebration? Gabrielle is... My father's face had gone an alarming shade of red. She's a difficult person. She's vindictive. So you do have two daughters? Of course I have two daughters, but only one of them deserves... He stopped himself. Too late. Deserves what, Mr. Whitmore? The ballroom had gone silent. The jazz band had stopped playing. 120-something guests stood frozen, drinks halfway to their lips, watching the patriarch of the prominent family unravel in real time. Madison deserves our support, my father said, trying to recover. She's always been the kind of daughter who... Ron, a voice from the crowd. I recognized David Miller, one of my father's oldest business associates. Also, coincidentally, one of my tax clients. Ron, I know Gabrielle. She handled my company's taxes for 3 years. She's one of the most professional, decent people I've ever worked with. What exactly do you mean she doesn't deserve your support? My father turned toward the voice. David, this is a family matter. You're at a public party celebrating your family, Janet interrupted, with press coverage you invited. If there's a family matter that affects the story, the public has a right to know. I watched my father's mouth open and close. No words came out. Someone near the back raised a phone, recording. The legacy of Ronald Whitmore, pillar of the Scottsdale community, was crumbling in real time, and he had no one to blame but himself. Rumors spread faster than champagne at a party like that. Within 30 minutes, the entire ballroom was buzzing with whispered fragments of the truth. Apparently, he gave one daughter almost $1 million. The other one wasn't even invited tonight. Something about refusing to help with a funeral? Did you hear what he said? Only one deserves... I stayed in the lobby bar, nursing my second glass of wine, watching the exodus through the windows. Guests began leaving early, checking their watches with sudden urgency, inventing obligations that hadn't existed an hour ago. My mother attempted damage control. I could see her through the archway, moving from group to group with a bright, desperate smile. There's been a misunderstanding, I heard her say to someone. Family disagreements, you know how it is. But no one was buying it. The question had been asked. The answer had been heard. You couldn't unring that bell. Madison stood frozen in a corner with Brandon, both of them pale as ghosts. She looked up once, toward the lobby, and our eyes met through the archway. I raised my wine glass slightly. She looked away. Janet Morrison was still there, still taking notes, now interviewing other guests, getting quotes, building a story. At 8:30 p.m., my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Gabrielle, this is David Miller. Just heard what happened. I had no idea your family treated you this way. If there's anything you need, please call me. And for what it's worth, I've known your father for 20 years and I've never seen him show his true colors so clearly. You did nothing wrong. I read the message twice. Then I finished my wine, left cash on the bar, and walked out of the Scottsdale Country Club. Behind me, the party was still technically happening, but the celebration was over. My father had built his image for 45 years. It took 30 minutes to destroy it. March 17th, 10:12 a.m., Phoenix IRS Office, Criminal Investigation Division. The building was exactly as depressing as I'd expected. Fluorescent lights, gray carpeting, the faint smell of bureaucracy and fear. I signed in at the security desk and waited in a plastic chair until a middle-aged man in a government-issue suit came to collect me. Ms. Simmons, I'm Agent Thomas Rivera. Thank you for coming in. His office was small and crowded with file boxes. A framed photo of two children sat on his desk. He gestured to a chair and I sat. You said on the phone you have documents related to an ongoing investigation? I do. I placed the folder on his desk. Copies of everything. The email, the loan agreements, the bank transfer records, the incomplete Form 709 filings. Agent Rivera spent 45 minutes reviewing the materials. His face revealed nothing. He made notes in a yellow legal pad with handwriting so neat it looked like a font. Finally, he looked up. These documents appear to show a pattern of systematic gift tax evasion over approximately 5 years. The email from December 2019 is particularly significant. It demonstrates clear intent to deceive. I understand. If our investigation confirms what these documents suggest, your father could face back taxes in the range of $300,000, plus a fraud penalty of approximately 75%, plus accumulated interest. Total liability could exceed $600,000. And criminal charges? Potentially. Though given your father's age and lack of prior offenses, the U.S. Attorney's Office would likely pursue civil penalties rather than prosecution. But that determination isn't made by my division. I nodded. What happens now? We expand our audit. Your father will be notified within 7 business days. He paused. You understand that once you submit these documents, this process can't be reversed? I understand. And you're still willing to proceed? I thought of Daniel, of the funeral I'd paid for alone, of being told I deserved nothing. Yes, I said. I am. The IRS letter arrived at my parents' house on March 24th. I know because Madison called me 20 minutes after my father opened it. They're expanding the audit. Her voice was hollow. 6 years of tax returns. They're asking for documentation on every transfer to my business. I told you what would happen. Dad is... I've never seen him like this. He threw a lamp. Mom locked herself in the bedroom. She paused. His lawyer called this morning. Said the IRS has evidence of intentional misrepresentation. He said they can't argue this was a mistake anymore. I listened without responding. There wasn't anything to say. The lawyer said whoever provided those documents to the IRS turned a civil audit into a fraud investigation. He said without that email they might have been able to settle for penalties. Now, Madison's voice cracked. Now he's looking at a civil fraud admission, permanent record, public filing. That sounds like a consequence of his actions. You did this. No. I kept my voice level. He did this. In 2019 when he sent that email. In 2020 when he filed false paperwork. Every year he chose to hide money instead of paying what he owed. I just stopped covering for him. Silence on the line. Are you happy now? Madison finally asked. Is this what you wanted? I considered the question seriously. Was I happy? No. Satisfaction wasn't the same as happiness. Justice wasn't the same as joy. I wanted to be seen, I said. I wanted him to acknowledge just once that I deserved the same consideration as you. He chose his pride instead. This is where that choice led. I'm meeting with my own lawyer tomorrow, Madison said quietly, to separate my finances from Mom and Dad's. That's probably smart. The golden child, she said bitterly, protecting herself from her own pedestal. Welcome to reality, I said. It's uncomfortable here, but at least it's honest. The article appeared on April 1st. A cruel date, though I doubt Janet Morrison planned it that way. The Whitmore Legacy, A Tale of Two Daughters. It wasn't front-page news. Scottsdale Living magazine didn't do front-page scandals. Instead, it ran as a feature piece in the Community Voices section. 3 pages, including photos from the anniversary party that now looked like evidence rather than celebration. Janet Morrison had done her homework. The article didn't mention the IRS investigation. She didn't have access to that information, but it documented everything else with surgical precision. The $900,000 spent on Madison over a decade. The $0 spent on me. My father's outburst at the party, quoted verbatim by 3 different witnesses. David Miller's statement that I was one of the most professional people he'd ever worked with. An unnamed guest describing my father as visibly hostile when asked about his older daughter. The most damaging part was the ending. When asked for comment, Ronald Whitmore declined to be interviewed. His wife, Patricia, provided a brief written statement. Our family matters are private. Neither addressed questions about why their older daughter, a respected tax professional in the Phoenix area, was neither invited to the celebration nor acknowledged in any of the evening's speeches or photo displays. The fallout was immediate. My father's membership at Scottsdale Country Club was placed under review pending clarification of certain matters. 3 business associates canceled standing lunch appointments. The Whitmore name, once synonymous with success and respectability, now came with asterisks. I read the article in my apartment with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired and relieved. And finally seen. Not by my parents, by everyone else. Sometimes that has to be enough. The IRS delivered its preliminary findings in May 2025. I know the numbers because Madison told me. We weren't close. We might never be close, but she'd started calling once a week. Brief conversations mostly, her trying to make sense of a childhood she was only now seeing clearly. The assessment was brutal. Unreported gift taxes, $312,000. Fraud penalty at 75%, $234,000. Accumulated interest over 5 years, $67,000. Total liability, $613,000. My father had to sell 2 cars from his vintage collection, a 1965 Mustang and a 1970 Corvette he'd spent 15 years restoring. Combined value, $185,000. He withdrew early from 2 retirement accounts, paying additional penalties on top of everything else. The criminal investigation was ultimately declined for prosecution. Agent Rivera had been right. The U.S. Attorney's Office looked at my father's age, his lack of prior offenses, and decided civil penalties were sufficient. But the civil fraud determination became part of his permanent record. Public filing. Anyone who looked would see it. Ronald Whitmore, respected businessman, country club member, pillar of the community, had officially admitted to defrauding the federal government. Madison had to refile her own tax returns for 5 years. Additional amount owed, $47,000. Her business, the real estate company that had never earned a dollar, was dissolved. The money her parents had funneled through it was reclassified as taxable gifts. I'm selling the house, she told me during one of our calls. The one Mom and Dad gave me. I can't look at it anymore without seeing what it really was. A tax shelter shaped like a dream home. What will you do? Something I should have done years ago. Figure out who I am when I'm not standing on a pile of someone else's money. It was the first time Madison had ever sounded like someone I could eventually forgive. My parents handled the aftermath exactly as I expected, badly. My father retreated into silence and resentment. According to Madison, he spent most days in his study, drinking scotch and refusing to discuss what had happened. He blamed everyone except himself. The IRS was corrupt, the journalist was vindictive, I was mentally unstable. Accountability was a foreign language he had no interest in learning. My mother sent me a letter 3 weeks after the IRS determination became public. Handwritten, 4 pages. Gabby, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you for throwing it away. But I need to say what I should have said years ago. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for staying silent when your father treated you unfairly. I'm sorry for choosing his comfort over your well-being. I'm sorry for the wedding I missed. I'm sorry for the funeral I should have attended. I'm sorry for 25 years of pretending inequality was normal because it was easier than fighting. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I just needed you to know that I see now what I refused to see then. My silence was complicity. My inaction was a choice. You deserved better. You deserved so much better. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. I hope someday, if you're willing, we can talk. Not as mother and daughter. I gave up that right long ago. But as two people who both made it through something difficult. Whatever you decide, I love you. I always have. Even when I was too weak to show it. Patricia. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I never would be. But for the first time, my mother had said the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. It wasn't enough to fix anything, but it was a start. The call from David Miller came on a Tuesday afternoon in late May. Gabrielle, I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, David. What can I do for you? Actually, it's what I can do for you. I've been thinking about what happened at that party, about what you said your family put you through, about the kind of person it takes to survive that and still turn out as decent as you did. I wasn't sure how to respond. I appreciate that. My daughter Emily and we've had our own problems. I made a lot of the same mistakes your father made, favoring one child over another, assuming success meant giving things instead of giving time. After I saw what happened to your family, I called her for the first time in 2 years. How did it go? She cried. I cried. We're having dinner next week. He paused. You didn't just stand up for yourself, Gabrielle. You reminded me what really matters. I wanted to thank you. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. This was the first time I'd cried since Daniel's funeral. Thank you, David. That means more than you know. There were other changes, too. Marcus Webb recommended me for a position at a larger firm, Collins and Associates, one of the top accounting practices in the Phoenix area. Senior tax manager, specializing in estate planning and complex returns. Salary, $112,000, a 35% increase from what I'd been making. I accepted. In June, the grief support group I'd been attending asked me to share my story with new members. Not the IRS drama, the boundary setting, the walking away, the choosing myself for the first time in 42 years. 12 women listened, 4 of them cried. 3 of them said some version of, I needed to hear that. For 25 years, I'd sought validation from people who couldn't give it. Now I was getting it from people who actually could. March 15th, 2026. 1 year since the party, 2 years since Daniel died. The cemetery was quiet in the early morning light. Dew still clung to the grass. A mockingbird sang somewhere in the trees near the maintenance shed. I'd brought white chrysanthemums, Daniel's favorites. He used to buy them for me every anniversary because he said they represented truth and loyalty. That's us, he'd tell me. True and loyal. I set the flowers against his headstone. Simple gray marble with simple words. Daniel James Simmons, 1980 to 2024. Beloved husband. You deserve to be loved. I'd chosen that inscription myself. The last words he ever said to me that I could truly believe. Hey, I said softly, settling cross-legged on the grass. It's been a while. I told him everything. The IRS investigation, the party, the article, my new job, Madison's weekly phone calls, the letter from my mother that I still hadn't answered. You were right, I said. About all of it. You told me I didn't need them to see me. You told me I already knew who I was. It just took me a while to believe it. A breeze rustled the chrysanthemums. I didn't do this for revenge. I want you to know that. I did it because you taught me something I'd never learned before. That protecting yourself isn't selfish. That walking away isn't weakness. That love doesn't mean accepting cruelty. I stayed for an hour, talking about nothing and everything. The mundane details of my new apartment, the clients at my new job, the strange, fragile thing growing between me and my sister. When I finally stood to leave, I pressed my hand against the headstone. I wish you were here to see who I've become, I whispered, but maybe you already can. The mockingbird sang again as I walked away. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward. I wrote the email to my mother in July, 4 months after receiving her letter. It took 11 drafts before I got the words right. Mom, I read your letter. I've read it several times. I appreciate you writing it. I appreciate you acknowledging what happened. I'm not ready to forgive. That might never come. I can't predict the future. Forgiveness isn't something I can force or schedule. It has to happen naturally if it happens at all. But I'm willing to try something smaller. Communication. If you want to reach out, I'll respond. Not phone calls. I'm not ready for that. Emails only. And there are conditions. No discussing Dad. I have nothing to say to him, and I don't want secondhand messages. No guilt trips, no family obligations, no manipulation. No asking me to fix things or mediate or make peace. That's not my job. If you can respect those boundaries, we can try to build something. Slowly. Carefully. I'm not promising anything except that I'll read what you write. If those conditions don't work for you, I understand. But that's what I can offer right now. Gabrielle. My mother responded 3 days later. Short, honest. I accept your conditions. Thank you for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. I'll write again next week. Love, Mom. We exchanged emails twice a month after that. Small things at first. What she was reading, how her garden was growing. Nothing heavy, nothing that touched old wounds. I never responded to my father. He never reached out. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired, only ended. Madison and I texted occasionally. She sent me a photo from her therapist's office in August, a worksheet titled Setting Boundaries. Learning the basics, she wrote. Better late than never. Better late than never, I agreed. We weren't sisters yet. Maybe we were becoming something better. Two people who chose to understand each other despite everything. September 2026. 18 months since the party. A lifetime since I stood in my parents' driveway, begging for $2,000. My new apartment had a balcony, small, barely room for 2 chairs and a potted plant, but mine. I sat out there most evenings, watching the sunset paint the Phoenix skyline in shades of orange and pink. Collins and Associates was everything Morrison and Blake hadn't been. Colleagues who respected my expertise, partners who remembered my name, clients who sent thank you notes and referrals. For the first time in my career, I felt like a professional rather than a servant. I'd started writing. A blog, anonymous, about family boundaries and emotional survival. The first post, When Loving Your Family Means Leaving It, had gotten 2,300 views in its first week. Comments poured in from strangers who recognized their own stories in mine. I thought I was the only one. You made me feel less crazy. I'm going to therapy next week because of this. 38 years of feeling invisible, and now strangers on the internet were seeing me more clearly than my parents ever had. I wasn't dating, wasn't ready. Daniel deserved to be mourned properly, and I deserved to heal at my own pace. Grief wasn't a box to check or a stage to complete. It was a room I'd live in for a while, and that was okay. Some evenings, I wondered what my father was doing, whether he thought about me, whether he regretted anything. Then I'd remember. It didn't matter anymore. His regret or lack of it was his problem now. I had my own life to build, my own future to create, my own value to define. No one wins in stories like this. Not really. Too much damage, too many years lost. But I didn't lose anymore, and that was enough. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If my story helped you see something about your own family, or gave you permission to set a boundary you've been afraid to set, then sharing it was worth it. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's survival. And sometimes, the people who claim to love us the most are the ones we need the most protection from. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And if you want to hear more stories like this, check the description for links to other videos. I'll see you in the next one.